Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back. We are talking today with a man who's got so much insight when it comes to helping our children move their lives forward through school, personal situations, and so much more. He has been a psychologist at the Reed Union School District for decades and has helped, I don't even know if we could put a number on it, the number of students over the generations. And he's back with us today, and we're going to field some questions. By the way, instant feedback, steve@gmail.com, if you want to reach out. This is Good Advice Helps with Dr. Allan Gold, who returns. How are you today?
Okay, thank you. Good to hear you.
You too. And where I want to begin today is with you, because seconds before we jumped on here, I said, hey, what do you got going on today? And you listed a couple of things, lunch and with somebody and a few other things. And you said, I'm going to go see my therapist. And I stopped for a second. I said, wow. First of all, fantastic. And second of all, you see a therapist as a psychologist. I'm intrigued. I think it's amazing. Let's talk about that. Your thoughts on therapy and you personally, why you continue to go.
Okay, very good question. I've actually seen therapists since I was a young adult. I think I went first for couples counseling when my ex-wife and I were having problems, and that wasn't too much, but I don't think I had the what should I say, the gift and the luxury of seeing anybody when I was a kid or a teenager, and I could really have used that, actually. Not because I was nuts or anything, but, just that there were issues to discuss. But anyway, when I was in graduate school, studying school psychology, I started going to, we had consultations with a psychiatrist who would help us work on situations that we were confronting. And then I went to a group psychotherapy with two very good women. And I'll never forget one of the most profound sessions that I ever had. The very next day, I was going to be taking my PhD orals, and I was absolutely convinced that at age 29, my 5 professors who were going to question me would find out how stupid I really was. And one of the women psychologists said to me 3 words: honor your fears. And I've never forgotten that phrase. Because rather than saying, oh, don't worry about it, you'll do fine, everybody gets through these things, but the message was, it was normal to be anxious when, I was going to be questioned and not sure what the questions were going to be, and had some, anxiety about, was I going to be able to pass this and do this okay? And the message was, it is normal human behavior to be anxious about things that are challenging, that hoops you have to go through to make progress and so on. And I always remembered that. And, when things were scary, after that, I'd say, just honor your fears, do the best you can, and you will manage. And I used to tell kids that too. But anyway, so once I had started that therapy, I didn't want to leave it. And I thought when I turned 30, life is just going to be the same after that. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. I used therapists. That very year, I started my job at the Reed School District. And so I used therapy for all these years to discuss personal issues and work issues. And really going into my own personality, because, I've always recommended that school psychologists have their own therapists, because the challenges that one is confronted with work can certainly be damaging to one's self-esteem, and to really begin to understand that, and to talk with a neutral person, that what you go through, what you're challenged with, you're not going to be perfect at, but not to be hard on oneself. When one is vulnerable to other people's traumas and tragedies, how do you protect yourself? Talking about it is just really excellent. So for most of my therapy while I was working, I would spend, I won't say exactly what percentage, but sometimes I would spend the whole time talking about a work issue. Sometimes I would spend the whole time talking about a personal issue, and sometimes half and half. So sometimes I would just need to brainstorm with somebody. How do I handle this situation? What do I do with this kid or this family? And so the therapeutic sessions helped with that. And then over the years, I realized that one's personal issues don't just stop. It doesn't matter how old you are. I've had to deal with death of my parents, breaking up of partnerships and marriages, death of a spouse, illnesses, all of these things that people have to deal with. Loss of friends, friends who abandoned me. So it doesn't matter how old you are, and now that I'm 78, dealing with older age. How do you deal with that? People my age get sick, they pass away, and have to think about, okay, how am I going to be a useful human being still? What's my legacy going to be? How am I still going to help people? How am I going to keep amused and energetic and young? Knock on wood, I'm still in good health, so I can do that. But no age is absent, has an absence of issues that one can deal with. So I've been going to my current therapist for 31 years. He's actually a few years older than I am, 3 years older. And so he really understands me very well. And, some days are, very profound, and other days are more just, kind of sharing what's going on. But I really rely on it, and I highly, highly recommend that psychologists, particularly school psychologists, but, not just psychologists, but anybody can really benefit. I think I've worked with some of my former students and who are dealing with boyfriends or girlfriends, and they really need premarital counseling to make sure they're making the right decisions. There's so many issues that come up in all parts of our life that therapy can really help. Of course, you have to have a good relationship with the therapist. You have to trust them. You have to feel that they're really listening to you. That can be a challenge as well. But so that's my view on therapy.
So I'm wondering about this. Have you ever gone to your therapist and confidentially talked about a situation that you dealt with as a school psychologist? Maybe something that was weighing a little heavier on you, and you just wanted to just verbalize it, bounce it off of somebody.
Oh, yes, definitely. Because unless a kid is threatening somebody else, threatening themselves, or being hurt, we do have confidentiality.
Sure.
So definitely, I've talked about what if a kid is depressed and how do I deal with that? What if a kid isn't talking to me? How do I deal with that? What if a kid has abusive parents? Then I'm obligated to inform Child Protective Services or the police. Absolutely, I would share, those complicated situations. Even if and it wasn't so much more in recent years, but in earlier years, if I felt really, really bad about what a kid was going through, or if I felt sort of helpless and didn't know how to approach the situation, I would get some, I would talk about it and hopefully get some suggestions about how to do that.
I'm deducing from what you're saying that everybody should be talking to a therapist.
Yes. I really believe that. And I'm not just saying that to, so a therapist can make money or something. No, because I really think life is extremely complicated. Even just talking about how do I communicate with this person so that I'm being respectful and they understand me and they can see my point of view and that I can understand their points of view. Because I think what we do, particularly with the way things are now in our culture, which is very impulsive and mean and derogatory, that doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And if a therapist can help you communicate more effectively, I think that's, and more respectfully, I think that helps relationships of all kinds, whether they're partnerships or friendships or boss and employee. Like I say, there's just so much that people need help with, and if they keep it buried inside, it doesn't get better.
I'm a firm believer in, and I'm currently not going to a therapist, but just logistics, insurance, and just making some changes. But I agree with you. And especially, I feel that everybody, before they enter into an important partnership, relationship, marriage, all of that, it should be mandatory to figure out what's going on, because there might be things floating out there from your childhood that you never connected with.
That's exactly right. And particularly when, people may think they have, compatible values. And, I'm not saying that people have to be identical to each other. But what may come up when they have children is very different ways of being raised. So that, they may get along just fine as two adults, but then they have children, and if they were raised differently, one parent might want to raise the child exactly the way they were raised, or if they were raised in a way that they didn't like, they may want to raise the child in the complete opposite way, and then you never know how the partner might want to do, and they could be in real conflict. That's why premarital counseling involving questions like, say you had a kid who was disrespectful to you, how would you handle it? Or say you had a kid who wasn't doing his or her homework, or who was being bullied by another kid, just regular growing up situations. And it would be very interesting for both parents, both potential parents, before they have children, to say, well, this is what I would do, or my mother did this, but I didn't like that. So having that discussion beforehand, and when they are parents as well, would be really important, because if they identified that, wow, we really see raising kids very differently, how are we going to compromise? How are we going to actually figure this out? And of course, if parents are of different religions and one one wants to raise their child with one religion and one with another religion. How are they going to solve problems? And then another issue for partners have to deal with is what happens if there's a crisis. I saw this, 30 years ago, 40 years ago with couples who one couple got AIDS, and I would see that the partner would just leave. Of course, these were, young men in their 20s and 30s and really didn't have to deal with caregiving. So it turned out that often somebody else would be the one who, stepped in to care. So for a couple to have some, again, premarital counseling, what if your partner gets really sick? How are you going to deal with that? And they may have that, sort of ideal, know what they should say, but you'd want to explore, did you ever have to deal with something that was really challenging to you, and how did you handle it? So all of those discussions can come up in therapy when they happen, or premarital counseling before they happen. So there's just never a lack of issues to discuss, that's for sure.
And to your point, every major relationship I've ever been in that didn't last, and it could have been 10 years, whatever, 15, whatever. If it was identified through counseling, what was going on with the person I was connected to, a lot of things would have come to light as I look back. And of course, a lot of things we deal with, no surprise, goes back to childhood, where situations were, and they could have been major, they could have been not so much major, but it's in our subconscious, and
That's right.
And we're walking around all day as adults, and it's that's known as the limiting belief. I want to pivot over to Josh, who checks in from Clearview, Illinois, instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com, and says, I'm in the process of going through a divorce. My son is 12 and is currently struggling since we told him about the situation. His grades are slipping, and he seems angry quite often. How can I help him?
Yes. Well, I would certainly recommend some counseling for the son. What I used to do for kids was I did divorce groups, and they were usually 8 or 9 sessions, and I did them at one particular school, and then if kids, this was my 3 to 5 school, grades 3 to 5, and we would talk about why parents married, why parents divorced, why they thought their own parents were divorcing. We talked about communication. That was very, very important. How could they express their feelings to their parents so that they would listen? For example, if parents were arguing in front of them, or if parents were asking questions about the other parent, and trying to use the kid as a snoop or a detective. And I would teach kids, I may have mentioned this before, but about not hard feelings like anger, but soft feelings like I'm confused, I'm worried, I'm hurt, I'm, those kind of feelings, to express those to parents so that they have a better chance that the kid would actually be heard. Mom and Dad, when you argue in front of me, I feel so worried and so scared. Please don't do that. Or when you ask me questions about my other parent, about Dad, and if he's seeing somebody, I just ask him yourself. It makes me feel so uncomfortable. And and we used to do role playing with the kids, so that I would usually work with a school secretary, and we'd be the two parents, and we'd give these different kind of situations and give kids the opportunity to practice on how they might respond to some of these uncomfortable situations. But it's somebody needs to be able to communicate with the kid and find out why he's so angry. Because underneath anger, and I've always said this, anger is often the first response, but if you dig a little deeper, you find that there is one of those softer feelings that's generating the anger, and it's usually hurt or worry or being scared or confused. And if somebody can, it would be great if there's a school psychologist at this young man's school who can talk to him, if he's willing to do that. Sometimes 12-year-olds, they clam up, and that's why I've always felt that being a school psychologist, and over a long period of time, so kids get to know you when they're little, and then they don't feel stigmatized and they're not scared to talk. But if this young man is willing to talk to a counselor at school, or maybe some kids at that age don't want to be stigmatized, and I don't want to go see Dr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so. Not that the doctor couldn't be a woman, but then having some outside counseling with somebody who really does deal with children of divorce. The kid may be just scared. What if my parents are moving and I have to leave all my friends at school? I'm angry about that. I don't want to do that. And, who knows what his mind is conjuring up. Certainly when parents divorce, there are two homes. I don't want to move to a home. I don't want to go from one parent one week and one parent the next week, and how am I going to remember everything? And, I've certainly seen kids, deal with that. And, it's very hard for them. So there's the social issues, too. Does he know anybody else whose parents are divorced? That might be a wise thing to do, to connect him with somebody who's been through it. Again, honor your fears. If you know somebody who's been through a similar situation and they've gotten through to the other side, that can be very useful. But he may be in a social situation where I can't believe this, that there are maybe few divorces and he doesn't want to be made fun of if other kids find out. Does he even talk about it with his, if he has some close friends, does he talk about it? Are kids making fun of him, or are they sympathetic? So there's a lot of factors here. I'm babbling on here about it, but
it's life-changing for everybody involved, the parents, the child, the children. We're just about out of time, but Allan, I want your feedback on this, and short answer, but I think you'll have an answer immediately. I've spoken to some who feel that if you are a parent, you've made the decision to have a child or children, short of abuse in your relationship with your partner, you should not get divorced. You made a decision. I'm just repeating what I've heard.
Yeah.
You've made a decision to be a parent and have a child, and getting divorced is like throwing your kid or children underneath an emotional bus, and you just need to work it out and move forward. Briefly here, what are your thoughts on that statement?
Well, again, it depends very much on the relationship. The first step when parents are feeling that way, they really need to have counseling. If the counseling doesn't work, there's co-parenting counseling, which is when parents do divorce, they may realize that, we've grown apart. I've seen divorces that are very, very compatible. The parents are still friends, but they're not in love anymore, and they don't have the feelings for themselves. But if they really are angry and can't get over it, it's more painful for kids to be part of that and to observe it. So I wouldn't say, no, don't ever get divorced. You did make your commitment, and it's not working out. But it's really worse for kids to observe that most of the time.
Yeah.
So I would say step one is when you're feeling that things are going downhill, get the counseling. See if you can resolve those issues. If not, and if you decide, then the next question is, how can we be good parents but not live with each other?
Yeah. It's a whole new world when those situations present themselves. But fortunately, there are people like you, Allan, available and in our schools, because our kids spend the majority of their days in school.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember one time, and then I'll be quiet, I think it was a second grader. Parents came to me and wanted to meet with their kid and wanted me to tell them that they were getting divorced.
Oh, boy.
I only had to do that one. I shouldn't be laughing at that, but I was, and I hadn't been working all that long. It was probably within the first 10 years of my job, and it was like, now how in the heck am I going to do this?
I have no words. When you just made that statement, I'm going to be honest, my mouth basically dropped to the floor, and I don't know. I didn't even know what I would do in that situation, because
somehow or other I managed it.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Well, you know what? Not because of the parents, because of the child.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. Allan, always great talking with you. So valuable, the information, and not just for parents, but also, we've heard before from those looking at school psychology as a career path. So all of it, I truly appreciate you joining us, and looking forward next time we get together.
Okay, thanks so much. You have a good weekend.
You too. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind, like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind, like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama, like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.